Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper LeBel, and today we're joined by Brian LeBel because Vincent Turner, our co-host and founder, has a prior commitment. He'll return next week, and so we look forward to having Vincent back. But today's show is being produced by Jeremiah Long and engineered by him. He's got some great pictures that we have. We had to kind of sort through a few of them because our guest topic here today is a guy who certainly everyone in the younger generation knows, they appreciate. He's got his own nickname. He's an amazing football player, and he's been able to do a lot outside of football since his career has been over to keep himself in the news, if you will, and a fantastic player. But Brian, today we're going to talk about Marshawn Lynch. Beast mode is going to be the topic of today's show.
Yeah, Skittles too. A couple of nicknames, right? So he's a man of many talents, man of multiple nicknames, and a man of many highlights as well.
Well, there are a lot of folks that would say if you're going to start an organization, you would want Joe Montana or Jerry Rice or Reggie White or Lawrence Taylor, whatever. But one of the running backs, especially in today's game, that you undeniably would say, you know what, I'd be better if I had Marshawn Lynch on my roster. You certainly proved that over and over again. Born on April 22nd, 1986, Marshawn Lynch's mother was a track runner in high school. So she ran the 200, and she was fast enough to get caught by his dad. But at least, he grew up in an area where athletics was a big part of his life. He is the fourth of four children, grows up in the Oakland area, goes to Oakland Technical High School, and was a four-sport star, Brian. He football, basketball, track, and then wrestling, of all things. That's not quite as big in California, but I think a lot of the maneuvers that you do when you're practicing wrestling, when you're going against somebody who's either bigger, faster, or stronger than you are at the high school level, you've got to learn to get yourself out of situations. I believe that made him an absolutely much better football player, to be tougher, to be one who accepts and embraces the physical aspect of the game, but also to use your speed in order to get an advantage. So four-sport guy in high school, and certainly had a prowess of being an excellent athlete. Your thoughts on the early days of Marshawn Lynch?
Well, I mean, if you're playing four sports in high school, there's probably not a lot of free time, anywhere during the year to be able to hang out with friends and just kind of do what you want. But yeah, I think it's exhibited on the field, the wrestling aspect of it, when he's wrestling away from defenders, when he's able to break tackles, when he's able to maneuver around guys and use his body to turn plays that should be 2-3 yard losses into 15-20 yards. Sometimes, long touchdown runs was a staple of what he was able to do. He didn't seem like the fastest guy, but when he got in the open field, he could move. So you could see the track background. He was a pretty good basketball player as well, which I know you get a lot of more so receivers and tight ends will tell you that, hey, basketball helped make me a better football player. But I mean, everything he did and all the prep he did in high school as far as the four sports helped prep him for what he was going to do later on in both college and the pros. You could see it on the field. The product was there, and it was spectacular.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, in terms of his athleticism, he's 5'11", but he looks bigger than that, and he's 215 pounds. He looks a lot bigger than that. He runs like he's bigger than that. So his athleticism, maybe he couldn't hit a curveball, I don't know, but he did everything else at such a good level that no one would have said, nah, I really don't want this guy on my team. He was an outstanding player for so many different reasons. So he goes to the Oakland Technical High School. He's a Bulldog there, where he plays all four sports. And in 2003, he only played in 8 games, and he played 10 plus playoffs at the high school level. In 8 games, he had 1,722 yards, 23 touchdowns. He played quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and he also played a little bit of DB on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
His high school ends up winning the league title 55-47. He had 233 yards in that championship game, 6 touchdowns, and they end up winning the league title. He's ranked the number 2 running back in the country. You said Adrian Peterson was number 1 coming out of that year. He was the East San Francisco Player of the Year, and he was a high school All-American. So who on earth wouldn't want to recruit him? But he ends up staying local, Brian. You mentioned a little bit earlier that, his love and his passion to stay close to home was certainly evident in the decision that he made to join the Cal Berkeley Bears.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of when he had a chance to at the end of his career when he said, hey, I can go play, the final chapter of my career. He chose to go with the Raiders. Raiders maybe weren't the best team in the world, but it's say, hey, play for my hometown team, the people that I'm around. It's a big deal to him. He's invested in his community. I believe he's still got a lot of family out there, which is a big deal to him. I know he's one of the guys who was really sad the Athletics are leaving Oakland as well, and a lot of the Raiders leaving there too.
Yeah.
But he's got tremendous community ties, and he's done everything he can to reinvest into that place. And it's a big part of his background, a big part of his childhood. And I mean, the fact that he was able to kind of stay somewhat local as far as going to Cal, I'm sure the Golden Bears, their faithful, were very, very, very happy with that decision.
Yeah, and he gets to play right away. He didn't have to wait at all because he was good enough. Now, J.J. Arrington was the starter at the running back position, and that's where Cal said that this is where he's going to be a star for us. That first year at Cal, he ended up being a freshman All-American. He had to split time, as we mentioned, 628 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. He had 2 additional touchdowns and 147 yards as a receiver. And as a kick returner, now he didn't score, but he had 371 yards for Berkeley. Back then, they were 12-2. They end up going to the Holiday Bowl. They lose to Texas Tech, but it was certainly the beginning of some things changing. And part of that was because of a junior college transfer named Aaron Rodgers. So Marshawn and Aaron were certainly a huge part of the success that Cal had early on during those days, and kind of reestablishing their program and giving SC, Washington, Oregon a run for their money.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they were, when they had all those guys there, it was kind of flash in a pan. I don't think a lot of people really knew what they had. Deshaun Jackson was there as well, if I'm not mistaken, at the very end of Marshawn's tenure. But they were a team that was definitely punching above their weight class. I know a lot of people kind of would hate on the Pac-12 a little bit, but some of those games, those Friday night games, those late Saturday games against teams like you said, SC, like Oregon, I mean, it was no guaranteed thing. It wasn't a cakewalk. They were going to come, and for 60 minutes, they were going to give you everything they had. They did a really good job of competing. And I mean, they had the talent on the field. You could just look at the roster and the guys they had there. They had guys that could absolutely play. Marshawn obviously being a staple of that, but probably one of the golden eras, no pun intended, for Cal football.
Yeah. Well, his 2005 year, Arrington graduated. He was done, and so Marshawn ends up being the starter, and he goes from number 24 to number 10. He had some cousins that played. Verdell Larkins, he used to wear number 9. And Robert Jordan, who wore number 11, he wanted to be sandwiched in between the two of them. Number 10 became open and available, and he ends up wearing that number for the rest of his college career. And in 2005, he rushed for 1,246 yards. He had 10 touchdowns, another 125 yards receiving. Kick returning, not quite as much as he did his freshman year, but Cal ends up beating BYU 35-28 in the bowl game that they play there, the Las Vegas Bowl. He has 194 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. And really, I think that helps to establish him as being not only the guy that can do it right now, but really being a future for at least the 2006 season as a part of Cal's upswing, and where we can play against SC and Washington and Oregon. We can beat these guys. In 2006, they're 10-3. This is going to be his junior year. They beat Texas A&M in the Holiday Bowl. He rushed for 1,356 yards that year, 11 touchdowns, 4 additional receiving touchdowns. He was a first-team All-American. He was a co-MVP for the team and the Pac-10 Player of the Year back then. So Marshawn Lynch had an absolutely outstanding collegiate career. We don't have the picture up right now, but he was even a pretty good driver and could write the medical carts as well.
Yeah. Also, 3 for 4 passing with 3 TDs, if I'm not mistaken, or it was 2 TDs, I believe. So if Aaron Rodgers hadn't panned out, it was 2 touchdowns. If Aaron Rodgers hadn't panned out, maybe Marshawn could have played some quarterback for them as well. Because he did a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, he could run in between the tackles, and he had the speed to get to the outside. And to get that and being able to be a pretty good receiver, you got to have the guy on the field, right? He's tough, He's strong. There were guys when he was in high school that he would be running the hills, training for. There was a collegiate player from the same high school that went to USC who watched him and said, "Hey, who's that kid?" And one of the assistant coaches said, "That's Marshawn Lynch." And the player says, "I don't need to see anything more than that. That guy's going to be a future. He's a Hall of Fame caliber guy. The way he works, the way he exudes himself, the power that he has." He's going to be a very difficult guy to tackle. So he finishes his career at Cal Berkeley with 3,200 yards. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry. He had 29 touchdowns in his 3 years that he was there. 8.8 yards receiving, had an additional 6 touchdowns on the receiving end. He had 600 yards total there. I mean, he's a guy that's going to help you score. He's going to help you move the ball down the field. And obviously, at the end of his career, he says, you know what, I'm going to forego my senior season, and I'm going to take my talents to South Beach, so to speak. But he ends up going a little bit further north than South Beach and ends up being drafted by the Buffalo Bills in the first round.
I don't know if you can get any more anti-Oakland, California than Buffalo, New York, but I think the fan base there loved him when he was there. They were very passionate. Team wasn't very good, but he was certainly a fun part of it. I think he kind of maybe wishes that he could have kind of done a little more there as far as helping turn the ship around. But he did have a little fall off near the end of his Buffalo career, and I think he ended up, ended with the Seahawks. I think that ended up working out pretty well for him, if I would say so.
Yeah, 4 years in Buffalo, and he's good. He's a starter. He plays a lot, and he wears number 23, by the way, with the Bills. And that was back when they were wearing the blue shield, if you will,
Yeah.
the badge that they had along the white jerseys. Um, Not tough times for Buffalo, but they just struggled. And Marshawn had a couple of injuries with his ankles and legs, and wasn't able to play the entire season for any of those years. In fact, his rookie season, he only plays 13 games. He plays in 15 of the 16 in 08. That's his second year. 13 games again in 09. Only starts 6 of those. And then in the fourth game of his fourth year in the league, Buffalo kind of wants to turn the page, and they end up trading him to Seattle. And in my opinion, Ryan, that was a difference maker. Seattle obviously welcomed him with open arms, and during his 5 years with the Seahawks, absolutely changed things there in Seattle and really became a mainstay of that team and that organization when they were turning things back around. They had been to the Super Bowl a couple of years earlier when they had Hasselbeck, when they had Sean Alexander, when they had Hutchinson, some names that we know, but obviously Seattle was yearning for a chance to get to another Super Bowl. And that eventually would happen. They were Super Bowl champions there in 2013.
I would say maybe Marshawn part of this, but what Seattle was able to do with their draft capital, as far as just nailing picks, whether it be with Russell Wilson or Richard Sherman or Earl Thomas or Cam Chancellor. I mean, and then obviously using, I think it was a later round pick to trade for Marshawn Lynch. I mean, the talent they were able to assemble there in just a couple of years is, if you were going to be, hey, do a study of how to be an NFL GM, I feel like what Seattle was able to do in that run, that championship run they had, would probably be one of the staples of it. But Marshawn, we talk about the Legion of Boom a lot. You talk about the defense. Obviously, I just named 4 defensive guys off the rip there. But Marshawn was a consistent part of that offense that really was like, hey, we're going to control the clock. We're going to control the tempo. We have a young quarterback in Russell Wilson, who maybe we weren't 100% sure we had in him because he was kind of he wasn't the traditional first-round guy. And Marshawn anchored that offense for the better part of, half a decade with what he was able to do. I mean, he took a lot of hits. He was able to carry a lot of the load. He was a staple of the league for a good bit there in Seattle.
Yeah, I think heroic type status, because everybody knew late in the year the Seahawks were for real. They didn't win every game that they played, but they were competitive. You mentioned the Legion of Boom. Their defense was absolutely amazing, and if you can't score, you can't win.
Can't win.
The best you can do is tie. And the 12th man and the ability to make all the noise when they get in that new stadium. I played in the Kingdom, and I understand that was an incredibly loud building. And part of the reason for that is because the roof was concrete. The whole building was concrete. Most buildings are tin or aluminum, and you got to keep it light, aesthetic, blah blah blah. But for a domed stadium to have, and the sound would just vibrate right back. Anybody that knows acoustics know that you bounce sound off concrete. It's basically you're echoing what you've already got. So it got incredibly loud there. But for the open air stadium of Seattle to have that same amount of noise, with the way that they designed that, with a smaller end zone in one end that kind of is shaped like a football, and then the other end, but the openness of it and still be that loud, and to have a home field advantage that was second to none at that time. Everybody knew that if you had to play in Seattle, the crowd itself was going to be an intimidating factor. You better bring your A game. And not many people were able to do that back in those days.
Very tough place to play. If you were to ask a lot of people in the NFC as far as contenders And as far as teams that maybe had Super Bowl aspirations, it was probably near the top of the list, maybe not the first one, but at the top of the list of, hey, we really don't want to have to go to Seattle in January. Just with how loud everything is there, with how invested they were in the team, and it's a lot more fun. It's a lot easier when you're good, which the Seahawks were. I mean, even before Marshawn got there, you were talking about Matt Hasselbeck and Sean Alexander. They were pretty good, but man, it was even on TV sometimes it gets deafening. Imagine being a quarterback having to call plays on the other end and not be able to communicate with your guys. And oh, by the way, there's Richard Sherman and there's Earl Thomas and there's Cam Chancellor and there's Michael Bennett and Bobby Wagner just standing on the other side waiting to pounce on a mistake. So it was, I mean, the Seahawks had one of the best home field advantages in the
Yep.
sport, like you mentioned, and they use it to their advantage.
Yeah, Bruce Irvin, Clements, all these guys that were just amazing players, and some of them were role players. Pete Carroll's ability to kind of get the best out of that. And you had mentioned Russell Wilson, and early in his career, his ability with this strong arm to be able to, it's almost like the middle of the fourth quarter, and he turns it on. They've been kind of sluggish and unable to move it. He has a 55, 60-yard dart that he throws to somebody. Remember, Russell was a baseball player and a shortstop, and could have played probably. He was a minor leaguer for sure, play at that level, but don't know if he had the hitting to get to the majors. Didn't matter. He had a strong arm, and he was able to lace a couple of balls down the middle, move the ball. Next thing you know, you give it to Marshawn, and you're going to get the touchdown. When the trade occurs in 2010, he finishes the 12 games remaining. He starts 11 with the Seahawks. He has 573 yards and 6 touchdowns with the Seahawks. And not very impressive, right? But then the following year, he's got 1,200 yards, 1,500 yards in his career best in 2012. In 2013, they win the Super Bowl. He had 1,257 yards there and 12 touchdowns that season. The next year, they go to the Super Bowl, and that's one of the most controversial plays in Super Bowl history, right there. They're in the Super Bowl against New England. You make the side. Go ahead. Talk a little bit about what that meant to you.
Marshawn might be one of the only guys in sports history, maybe not just NFL history, where his most known moment, and he's got a lot of good ones. The pictures we had up, he's got a lot of good ones as far as positive stuff, but is him not getting the football not being in his hands, and the ball being at the 1 yard line. And I know they've debated this, and Seahawks fans don't want to hear this anymore, but it's just, hey man, if I had the ball at the 1 yard line, I'm probably going to give it to my all-pro running back there, who runs a lot bigger than he is, who is a lot stronger than he looks, and is seemingly unstoppable in these situations. But that's not how it panned out. Could have been 2-time Super Bowl champ, but I think they're happy with the one.
So if I remember correctly, and I'm not going to, I don't want to get your cards and letters, folks, if you find I made a mistake. But the play beforehand, they did give him, it was an amazing catch to get the ball inside the 5. They give it to Marshawn, and he gets to about the 1.5, right? I know there's no half-yard line, but it's between the 1 and the 2.
Yeah.
And everybody in the world, they line up in the same position that they did to get to the 1 or the 2. And they decide to run that little play action, the pass, and Malcolm Butler, we all know what happened. I'm just saying, from a coaching standpoint, the reason you criticize, and Chris Collinsworth did absolutely massively, you give the ball to that guy. What are they thinking? He's going to score. Give him the ball. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, everybody knows that he's going to do that. So we're going to line up in the same position that we did and make it look like we're going to give it to him. And then we're going to do the play action. We're going to try to fake them out and make them think that we're going to run, and we're not going to. It backfired. I get it. But I understand the motive behind the offensive coordination. They give Pete Carroll an absolute ribbing every time anybody talks about it. Pete's even said, we probably should have done it. But the decision was, go-to was, we were going to fake it to Marshawn, and we're going to try to go over the top and get our touchdown that way. Remember, the Patriots were an incredible team. They had already won a couple of Super Bowls, and Vrabel and everybody else, Richard Seymour, Will Wolf,
Butler.
They had Hall of Famers all over the place. So, and Butler, you just right place, right time. He said that, I kind of sensed that they were going to do that. I knew from film that was a possibility. I just stepped in front of it. I make the play.
Well, funny enough, Patriots have film. Because Bill Belichick, hey, listen, we got 2 weeks for the Super Bowl. Everything's on the table, right? We're gonna go over every play they've run over the last 2 years. This offensive coordinator, they're bringing stuff back up for when he's assistant quarterback coach in college. They're on top of it. They actually had on film Malcolm Butler going up against that play in practice, and he whiffed it. It was awful. He missed it completely, couldn't get there. It's a touchdown, and then they end up running it in the game. And he's like, "Oh, I remember this." And then it's just it's incredible it panned out that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you said, though, I mean, everyone and their mother's like, hey, they're going to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch here. I'm not sure if they still had a timeout left. I know there's still about 20-something seconds left. So if you had to spike the ball, you still have a fourth down play. But just, it's hindsight. If Russell Wilson throws a touchdown there, we're sitting here thinking, oh, my gosh, what a great call, right? They got Marshawn Lynch, and they fake it to him, and everyone's fooled, and you score, and you run off the field, and you win the game. And it's just, it's not how it panned out, unfortunately. But I think Marshawn gets in there, though. Even all these years later, I still think Marshawn gets into the end zone.
Yeah. Everybody that, they already know what the other result was, that they
Yeah.
didn't get there. So why wouldn't you do it that way? But, they win that game, and now we're talking dynasty because they end up losing to the Broncos in the first Super Bowl that was played in New York at MetLife Stadium. For obvious reasons, getting to 3. But losing 2 of them is a lot different than if you win 2 or if you win 3 in a row. Now you're up there with some of the iconic teams of all times. You're with the Steelers, you're with the Dolphins, you're with the Patriots, of course. It's just a completely different scenario in how you look at it. But what an amazing run that those Seahawks teams had there. Marshawn stays at 2015. It's his final year. In 2016, because injuries and some other things, he ends up not playing. And then, as you mentioned earlier, wants to go back to home and play with the Raiders. Talk a little bit about his Oakland experience and the 2 years of being a Raider.
Well, he was a Raider. You say that. There's not a ton to write home about as far as what Oakland was able to do as far as the on-the-field product. But like we were saying, he's real big. He's a big community guy. He loves Oakland. Born and raised there, wanted to stay as close to home as possible, and he had a chance to go back there. And I think once that kind of happened, I remember, you have Ian Rappaport and you have Adam Schefter, like, yeah, he's going to go back home. And that's just who he was, and that's what he did. And, the numbers weren't gaudy. They didn't jump out at you. He didn't do anything spectacular while he was there. But he got to don the silver and black. He's one of the last group of guys that actually got to do that, before they jetted for Vegas. And honestly, I think he'll look back on his Oakland time very fondly. Maybe not as much for the product on the field, but getting to be a Raider, I think, was a lifelong dream of his, and getting to fulfill that after everything else he had accomplished was pretty special.
Yeah, his time in Oakland, he had 891 yards in 2017. He only had 376, only played in 6 games in 2018. And, Oakland used to be, when Al Davis was running it was the place to rejuvenate your career, a chance for you to make some amazing things happen. Ted Hendricks ended up being a Hall of Famer, even though he was good in Baltimore. He ends up going to the Raiders. Jim Plunkett being one of many other players, numerous examples of guys that would finish out their career. They get Rod Woodson there. They get a bunch of other guys. But it turned out after Al died, and in my opinion, it's almost where players go to die. Where elephants go to die. Oakland seemed to be the place where guys like Jerry Rice, for example, just give us one more great season and we'll make something great happen. And it didn't turn out. And for obvious reasons, a lot of issues there with the Oakland Alameda Coliseum, with the fans, with the local government, and not being able to put a new stadium there. And what a loss that is for all of us, because having the Raiders, what they stand for, and having that be Oakland, it's a tough, rough part of town, and everybody knew it. But it ends up his final year is in 2019. He only played in 1 game. He got 34 yards on 12 carries. But he ended up getting to retire as a Seahawk, and I think that meant a lot to him as well. We didn't mention Skittles. Talk a little bit about some of the goofy things that Marshawn was a part of. In some of the photos that we've had, I don't think we were able to find it, but I'd seen it elsewhere. He's driving the medical cart while he was a Berkeley Bear. And just some of the fun stuff that he was around. And one of those things, and I'll let you mention this, or at least talk about it a little bit more in depth, was his inability to be able to communicate like what reporters would want him to do for post-game interviews and for obviously Super Bowl conversations. He was a master of not saying anything and being the one who ended up being on top and controlling the situation.
Well, I'm just here so I don't get fined is probably one of the more iconic things, and that usually gets lost in the shuffle when you talk about Marshawn Lynch. But I don't think
I'm here
Skittles
because I
is.
have to be. I'm
Yeah,
here
I'm here because
because
I
that's
have to be.
question.
They're
Yeah.
making me do it. They're gonna take my money if I don't, so I have to be here talking to you guys. Unfortunately, um, and it was just there was never a dull moment, and he was likable all the way through. There's never a point where you're like, man, this guy's boring. This guy's not fun. Marshawn Lynch was a fun guy to be a fan of. He's a fun guy to watch. I'm a little envious of Seahawks fans because I'm like, hey, this was one of the centerpieces of your team for a long time. The Skittles thing, I don't think that's part of the TB12 diet. I don't think Tom Brady would advocate eating Skittles on the sidelines in the middle of the third quarter. But I mean, he was a guy who's like, hey man, I like candy, I like Skittles, and if I want them on the sidelines, I'm going to eat them. And I'm sure Skittles, kind of took care of him. I'm sure he didn't have to pay for any Skittles after that point. I'm sure they maybe lifetime supply, probably still to this day. He
He had
probably
a 2-year supply from Mars, whatever the name
yeah
of the host company is, for
yeah.
just that alone. I think that was a great trade out for them.
Oh man, yeah, because we still talk about it to this day. As far as the marketing, they'd be like, "Hey, one of the faces of the NFL is over here." I mean, the guy's playing the Super Bowl. Is he's on the sidelines right now eating Skittles. I'm sure that was a very happy meeting that Monday morning, as far as the board of directors for Skittles, whoever is overseeing that. But I mean, there was never a dull moment. I mean, he's an actor now. What he's doing, it's just he's all over the place. He's very likable. I remember one of the topics that they had, the hot mic they had with him talking about he's literally eating Skittles, talking to I think it's Richard Sherman, like, hey, I'm gonna go give out some turkeys back home for Thanksgiving if you want to come hang out. He's like, yeah, sure, awesome, sounds great. And it's just the kind of guy he was. He gave back a lot, like we've been saying, man. He loves Oakland. He loves that part of his life and his early life as far as growing up there, and a lot of memories there. A lot of who he is Oakland, and he does everything he can to give back and help them, and a good dude, and is a lot of fun.
December 12th, 2014. I'm reading that. Yeah, was the answer to all of the questions that he was asked.
Yeah.
There was another incident where he goes, "Thanks for asking," for every response. I appreciate you asking was another one, but yeah, I'm here because
Here because
I don't want to get fined.
I want to get fined.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure the press and the NFL especially were livid at the fact that he was doing stuff like that. But he didn't want to be controlled, and he didn't want to say something that was wrong. I think
Yeah.
he realized the value of, I know what we're going to run, and I'm not going to tell you, and you're not going to get anything out of me because I'm a pretty open, fun guy, and a great teammate. Everybody loves him that I know. He got a little bit of a legal trouble. He had some incidences with the law that we'll refrain from going into further depth here. But an amazing career. And you mentioned the TV side of it. Most of the roles that he has are where he plays himself,
Yeah.
which I think is great. That he did that. The League, running with Bear Giles, Brooklyn
Oh
Nine-Nine.
yeah. Oh yeah.
There's a show called Bar Rescue, Murderville, The Great American Banking Show, 80 for Brady, Stars on Mars, all these places that he's gone, and now he's getting other roles. There's different things that are taking place, and I think if the role fits and there's a spot for a thick running back type guy, a football player, if you
Yeah.
will, terrific. He'll do that, but maybe some of these other parts, we're going to find out there. But most attempts from rushing, most yards rushing, most touchdowns rushing um, in the regular season, in the career, most total touchdowns, most yards from scrimmage, most all-purpose yards. He is by far most games with at least one touchdown scored in the playoffs. In the regular season, Marshawn Lynch is definitely a record holder during those few years that he was in Seattle. Obviously, a difference maker there for the franchise, for the organization. And let's take a look at some of the accomplishments that he's had. He's a Super Bowl champion, first team All-Pro. He was the second team All-Pro in 2014. 5 times he goes to the Pro Bowl. He was the leading touchdown leader 2 times. He was a member of the 2010 All-Decades team with the NFL. He was a Pro Football Writers All-Rookie team in 27. He was a Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, Holiday Bowl, Colt MVP and champion there in that game. First team All-Pac-10 in 2006. And he was the MVP of the Las Vegas Bowl. 10,400 yards rushing in his NFL career. That is one Marshawn Terrell Lynch. Brian, final thoughts.
94 total touchdowns as well. Dude had a knack for the end zone. He scored. He's one of those guys where, you get those one trick kind of running backs that are like, hey, we're going to give you the football inside the 5-yard line. It's yours. And he was that for a very long time, but he could also run. He was a 3-down back that could do that. And that's pretty cool to have a guy like that in Marshawn Lynch on your team. It takes a lot. Like I said, we were talking earlier, it takes a lot of pressure off a young quarterback. They had a good offensive line too. I'm sure he'll credit every single guy that blocked up front for him. But Marshawn, his legacy is still being forged. He's still doing so much stuff. He's still in the news. He's a lot of fun, but his NFL career, man, as far as a running back, what he was able to do, he's one of the best to ever put on the cleats.
In my opinion, he was must-see TV because you never knew when he was going to break it. He rushed with high knees and 2 hands on the ball when he was going through the line of scrimmage, and he'd get tackled for a 1-yard gain, tackled for a 3-yard gain, tackled for 4 yards, tackled for -1, and then eventually he'd break one and pop it. And that, to me, was the must-see aspect of it. You never knew what was going to happen, but there are dudes in the secondary, linebackers, that didn't want to hit him anymore in the fourth quarter. They didn't want to get punished like that. And there were a lot of DBs that wanted nothing to do with him. And he obviously was able to take advantage of that.
Ask everyone on that Saints roster and that play on the defensive side.
I never mind it when the Saints look embarrassed and have a hard time. But as a staff member and an executive, they're called the Bay Area Panthers. He's been an owner since 2019 with them. The FCF Beasts, which is another football organization, and even the Seattle Kraken, the hockey team from 2022. Marshawn is a partial owner of a hockey team. So God bless him and all the different efforts that he has, an NFL legacy in so many different ways, and a guy that we enjoy talking about him. Any final thoughts there, Brian?
Marshawn Lynch, a lot of fun to watch. He's a great guy, a lot of fun. And I think he was one of the few guys that took his personality and he exhibited who he was as far as his personality on the football field, and they meshed very, very well.
Yep, you get what you get, and that's Marshawn Lynch. And with many different Seahawks, Buffalo Bills, Cal Berkeley Bears, Oakland Raiders, they were glad with what they got out of him. So for Brian LeBel, Jeremiah Long, who is our producer and engineer, Vincent Turner, who's not able to be with us today, he's our founder and co-host. I'm Harper LeBel saying thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition, getting a chance to talk today about Marshawn Lynch. Thank you for being a part of it today, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.